The Nazi regime lasted from 1933 to 1945 and was undoubtedly one of the most horrific periods of history.
To begin to understand Hitler, you've really got to understand that he was the most amazing demagogue.
The Nazi Party and its immoral leader instilled one of the most corrupt regimes on the people of Germany and its invisible enemies. However, Adolf Hitler was not working alone.
It's the SS men doing not only the exterminations and are notorious for being some of the most evil and deadly troops.
He had a circle of some of the most barbaric and evil men alongside him, who helped make the atrocities possible.
If there were unpleasant things going on or policies that they didn't like, then somehow that Hitler couldn't know about it, that he wasn't associated with it, it can't have been him. If only the Fuhrer knew, this wouldn't be happening.
These are the Nazi fugitives. Adolf Hitler was a German politician and leader of the Nazi Party. He rose to power as the Chancellor of Germany in 1933, and then as Führer in 1934. During his dictatorship from 1933 to 1945, he initiated World War II in Europe by invading Poland on the 1st of September 1939.
Extremist politics thrives on chaos, poverty, destitution, and want. And what you see as a result of the Wall Street crash and the slump, the late 20s, early 30s, are all those things in this hideous cocktail that an extremist like Hitler, he's saying, I can solve this.
Some of the important ways in which he helped the party to develop was through the initiation of a newspaper, so a party newspaper called the Volkische Beobachter, the People's Observer.
And also what Hitler is absolutely amazing at is speech making. And to begin to understand Hitler, you've really got to understand that he was the most amazing demagogue. He got on that stage, this little man, and he would sort of grow in stature. He would sort of absolutely take over the entire beer hall with his presence. He would shout and he'd get quiet and he would almost enter into a kind of trance. And the audiences would be mesmerized by this. And indeed, they'd be mesmerized by it for decades. And this is key to how Hitler gets into power, because when he's on the stage, he becomes another figure.
On the 30th of January 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, but of a coalition government. So there were just 3 Nazi posts in that coalition government.
It's very tempting to think that when Hitler comes to power in early 1933, that his grip on power is absolutely total. In fact, he has a very uneven, shaky start. He's still quite worried about public opinion. So what he does is a mixture of passing various laws that give him more and more power, like the Enabling Act, that actually makes him immensely powerful. But also, he takes advantage of various events like the Reichstag fire, in which the German Parliament building burns down. Now, it's highly likely, but never proven, whether the Nazis actually burnt it down themselves. but certainly in a sense it doesn't matter. What happens is that Hitler and the Nazis took advantage of the Reichstag burning down to show that there was a communist plot against what the Nazis described as still being a democratic government, and it enabled them to seize more power, by emergency decree.
Very quickly he turned Germany into a one-party state. So first of all, he made sure to eliminate the influence and power of the German political left. So the Socialist Party and the Communist Party, for a start, were banned, but over a short amount of time as well, the Nazi Party was the only legal party too.
Eventually, in January 1933, he becomes Chancellor. Now, don't forget, Chancellor in Germany, and this still remains today, is not, at the time, the head of state. The head of state is the president. So it's the Chancellor, though, who has the real executive power. In order to take as much power as he can, he's also going to have to make himself head of state. And that really becomes an opportunity for him when Hindenburg dies, and he's able to take on the role of both president and chancellor and kind of create this new role for himself, and that is the role of Führer, the German word for leader. That is a fascist term. Be in no doubt, this is a kind of new form of governance that Germany now has. Other parties are banned. The only party allowed is the Nazi Party. This has become a totalitarian state, and Hitler can say to the German people, you voted for it. It's a con, and it's a con that worked.
Pageantry, the district leaders from all over Germany swore personal allegiance to him, hypnotized with the belief that they were members of a master race. This film will deal with Act One of the Nazi bid for world power, the most fantastic play in all recorded history.
Hitler starts to build up his power by, trying to employ and find the right people who are going to listen to the beat of his drum and follow it. And so there's a lot of very patient politicking and a lot of persuasion, a lot of speech making. It's a very, very difficult rise to power. But Hitler knows that it can't take place through force. It has to take place from the ballot box and not the bullet.
Paul Joseph Goebbels was a German Nazi politician and Reich Minister of Propaganda of Nazi Germany from 1933 to 1945. He was one of Adolf Hitler's closest and most devoted associates. He was known for his skills in public speaking and his deeply virulent anti-Semitism, which was evident in his publicly voiced views. In May 1933, Goebbels arranged the burning of all un-German books at the Opera House in Berlin, indicating that the Nazis were taking control of everything. He gained control of the media entirely, controlling all aspects of the press, radio, theatres, films and television, literature, music and the fine arts. Joseph Goebbels and his wife Magda are seen as the perfect German family to set an example for the German people.
Joseph Goebbels joined the Nazi Party quite early on, as did Hitler, and he became very much involved in those early years with helping the party to develop, and in particular with these techniques of propaganda and really getting these messages across to the German nation. Part of the way that he and Hitler did this was to use very short slogans, but to keep repeating them so that everybody knew what the Nazi Party was about.
He is married to a very striking blonde woman called Magda. Now, Magda has been married before to a very wealthy German industrialist, but she eventually gets divorced and marries Joseph Goebbels, who was a real Casanova, actually. Even though he was short, club-footed, and not an attractive man, he had a lot of sexual conquests. What you see in the marriage of Joseph Goebbels and Magda is a three-way, not in bed, but emotionally between those two and Adolf Hitler. Because Adolf Hitler absolutely adored Magda Goebbels and thought that she was the kind of perfect Nazi woman. And she was blonde, and she was, sort of vivacious, and she was absolutely devoted to Hitler. She absolutely adored him.
Magda was very good for the Nazi Party, and when Goebbels introduced her to Hitler, Hitler got on very well with her and sort of could see the advantages and encouraged them to get married. Part of the reason for that was that she was very well bred and very refined and elegant. She was the mother of the Reich because she had 6 children.
Hitler liked the Goebbels marriage as a kind of domestic situation he could drop in and out of. He liked the security that involved children running around, boats on lakes, it felt normal. And also, Hitler did not want to have any rumours about his relationship with Magda Goebbels, because there were rumours that he had fathered some of the Goebbels' children, and that had seen even a very senior Nazi sent to a concentration camp for actually mentioning that.
Hitler and Joseph Goebbels had sort of grown through the ranks of the Nazi Party and sort of succeeded, sort of made their rise to success together. When Hitler came to power, Goebbels was somehow overlooked for a cabinet position. We said there were just 3, he didn't get any of them. Nevertheless, after the Nazis took power, that seizure of power, he orchestrated a very big torchlight parade, a kind of victory parade for the new movement. He knew how to get the message across to the Germans. So once he was the Minister of Propaganda, first of all, there was censorship of the press, but also not just controlling the press, but he controlled all aspects of cultural life. So that was art, architecture, literature, music. Propaganda machine was very, very important to the whole story that the Third Reich was telling, and indeed right up until the end, and indeed even important once the tide of the war turned against Germany. There was still this need to maintain the storyline, to maintain what the Third Reich represented.
So, you have essentially Goebbels, heart of the Third Reich, propaganda minister, getting word out there. Magda Goebbels, his wife, who is more devoted to Hitler than to him, and then you've got Goebbels, who's probably more devoted to Hitler than he is to his own wife. And if you want to see the ultimate expression of this twisted, bizarre, dark, horrific love, if you like, it's the fact that they both kill themselves to follow Hitler into the afterlife, and they kill their own children in the bunker, poison all 6 children, because a world without Hitler and a world without Nazism is no place for their kids. That's how much they adored Hitler.
Heinrich Himmler was Reichsführer of the Schutzstaffel and a leading member of the Nazi Party of Germany. Himmler was considered one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany and a leading architect of the Holocaust. Heinrich Himmler established his force of elite bodyguards for Hitler, the SS. Himmler established the first Nazi concentration camp in Dachau, indicating he had no issue bringing harm to Jews, as he considered them vermin within Germany.
Himmler, like Hitler, looked like the very inverse of the kind of Aryan, blonde, 6'5" tall superhuman. He was a very short man, sort of weak jawline, very ugly, sort of pebble glasses, former chicken farmer. He looked very, very unimpressive.
Himmler had joined the Nazi Party in quite early years, and I think that the important thing about what Himmler did was that he established the SS. And the SS started out as a very small group and, in fact, started out as Hitler's personal bodyguard. Himmler extended his power very quickly and his power base. So with the SS as a very small organization that had started out as Hitler's bodyguard, suddenly became thousands strong. By about 1936, he was in charge of a very vast complex of the SS, the Gestapo, which was the secret police, and the security police.
And what Himmler does from, almost from the beginning is to build the SS up into a state within a state. Because by the height of Nazi power, Himmler is in charge of an organization that has a kind of civil side to it, an administrative side to it, which is huge and has fingers in so many pies, and also the Waffen SS, the armed SS, which is there to help fight the war. And its troops are notorious for being some of the most sort of kind of evil and deadly troops, as part of the war.
He became in charge of the whole concentration camp system.
He was responsible for the Holocaust because, it was the SS largely who carried it out. And when he went to go and kind of witness a slaughter, some brains were splattered upon his coat and it caused him to vomit. He never, this is the man responsible for it and he can't cope with it. I'm not saying it's desirable that he should have coped with it, but it just shows you that he didn't actually have the personal appetite for butchering people himself and got other people to do it. In many ways, he was a coward.
Hermann Wilhelm Goering was a German politician and military leader and later a convicted war criminal. Goering was one of the most influential figures in the Nazi Party. He was also framed in a scandal, claiming he was attempting to take over the Führer's powers in the war's final days. Goering wrote a letter to Hitler, offering to relieve Hitler of his duties and act in his place, as he had believed the Führer was encircled and helpless in Berlin. This was a reasonable act, as Hitler had named him the political heir. Hitler issued a telegram to Goering and told him he had committed high treason and gave him the option to resign his office in exchange for his life.
Hermann Goering is a really key Nazi figure. He's a big figure in every way because he also became enormously fat. But you've got to think of Goering and his kind of arc, if you like. So he goes from being a First World War fighter pilot hero who's got the Pour le Mérite medal, which is the highest medal that can be won by the German fighting man in the First World War. For the British, it's like winning the Victoria Cross, or for the Americans, it's like winning the kind of Medal of Honor. It's a hugely important award. And so he's a venerated pilot, very successful fighter pilot during the First World War. And then when he falls in with the Nazis in Munich in the 20s, he's feeling that's giving him a kind of sense of purpose.
Goering was quite an interesting character because he had several different roles in the Third Reich, and even before then, if we think about his First World War record as this sort of flying ace, it meant that later on Hitler made him head of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force.
The problem is that he's on the famous beer hall putsch in 1923 and he gets shot and wounded. And when he's recuperating from his wounds, he's given morphine, heroin, effectively. And it's that he becomes addicted to. Goering is addicted to morphine all the way through from the beer hall putsch in 23, for another 23 years until he dies in 1946. It holds him back in many ways, but he is a man who likes the finest things in life. And so when the Nazis do come to power, and that's partly thanks to the fact that Goering is such a capable politician, and because he comes from a pretty well-off background and married to an aristocrat, he to some of the kind of old school German bigwigs looks like the decent face of Nazism because he's kind of a war hero and quite an old school figure. So he's absolutely instrumental in helping the Nazis get into power. And he consolidates a lot of power into his own pockets and hands, if you like. So he's in charge of the Prussian police. He's initially in charge of the Gestapo, the secret state police. He's in charge of the 4-year plan, which is an important economic imperative. This is a man with a lot of power, and he uses it to personally enrich himself.